Louis Riel was born on October 22, 1844 in St. Boniface of the Red River Settlement. Louis Riel was a Métis leader and a legacy in Canadian history. As a professional historian, I know this. But what do you think the general Canadian public knows about the Reformation leader, Louis Riel?
Today I'm here at Film and Right to test the historic knowledge of today's youth. First interviewee, come on down. Alright, do you know who Louis Riel is?
Yes, I believe I do.
Who is he?
He led the Métis group against the rebellion because he did not agree.
So, do you know what he did for Canada?
Yeah, he fought for the Métis group so they wouldn't lose all their land, even though they lost.
Okay. Would you say he's a legacy in Canadian history?
He defined Manitoba's presence in today's Canadian world.
Okay, thank you. Do you know who Louis Riel is?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Who is he?
He's this guy from northern Canada.
Alright. Do you know what he did for Canada?
Yep. He united Canada in the conquest.
Alright, would you say he's a legacy in Canadian history?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah?
First prime minister ever. Definitely.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
Louis was an educated man who had gone to school in Montreal. He was a French-Canadian man of native origin, a Métis as those were called. He fought alongside the Métis for many native rights and freedoms.
Do you know who the Métis are?
No.
Do you know who the Métis are?
Yes.
Who are they?
Native group.
Did you know Louis Riel was of Métis origin?
Yes.
Do you know what the Métis did?
They rebelled against the Canadian government.
Do you know who the Métis are?
Yeah.
And who are they?
I don't know.
Okay. Do you know who the Métis are?
No, I don't.
With his valued Eastern education, Louis was eventually elected president of the National Métis Committee, a committee dedicated to preserving rights and heritage of Native people. The first rebellion against the government started in 1869 on October 11th and November 2nd. On October 11th, Louis Riel led the Métis to stop the Canadian land surveys in the Red River Settlement, conducted by Lieutenant Governor William McDougall. The halt of the surveys were in protest against the transfer of Rupert's Land from the Hudson's Bay Company to the Dominion of Canada. Less than a month later, on November 2nd, the Métis Committee, including Louis Riel, prevented William McDougall from entering the Red River Settlement with a roadblock. Armed Canadians appeared out of nowhere with hopes of enlisting the Scottish parishes of Red River. The Métis people were disturbed by the unknown armed forces in the area, and as a result, in an act of panic, a man named Thomas Scott was sentenced to death on March 4th, 1870 by Louis Riel's associate. Louis was blamed for the murder of Scott and was exiled to the United States, but only for 4 months. Upon his return, he was enlisted into a mental asylum and left the asylum in 1878. By early 1884, Riel was ready to lead the Métis to another fight. By early 1885, Riel, who thought he was on a mission from God, decided to prove his point and gain support by capturing the parish church in Barouche in March 1885, along with an armed group of Métis. They used the church to form a provisional government and demanded the surrender of nearby Fort Carleton. The rebellion between the Métis and the police barely lasted 2 months before the fighting stopped and Louis had to stand down and surrender. Although the fight was between the Métis and the police, there were many other Aboriginal groups impacted. July 6, 1885, Louis was formally charged with treason, and on July 20th, his trial began in Regina, Saskatchewan. November 6th of the same year, Louis faced the death penalty and was hung for his brave acts of treason. His body was taken back to St. Boniface where it all began. His grave and his home are still a popular attraction in Canada today. Louis' rebellions were for rights and freedoms of the Canadian Native population. These rebellions prompted the Indian Act, bringing us 2,267 native reserves in Canada. These reserves take up 2.67 million hectares of land. Louis Riel, even in his death, prompts protests such as the recent Idle No More protests and the Oka crisis